Wherever you are in this wonderful world of ours, on behalf of the Leadership Simply Institute, I'd like to welcome you to chat time with me, Nev Garnham. I'd like to remind you, you're far better than you think you are. You are much more capable of doing things and achieving things than what at times you might believe yourself to be. So please always remember, you are far better than you think you are. Chat time today, I'd like to ask you the question and discuss, are you a rebel? Now, before we go on specifically to that topic, I'd like to remind you of some of the key things that we talked about in regard to people skills, because this is very important as part of whether you're a rebel or not. So in terms of people skills, as we talked about in the other chat session that we had, I need to ask you to ensure that you never underestimate your abilities to do and achieve what you want to do. Similarly, I'd ask you never to underestimate the ability of other people to achieve what they want to do if they're given half a chance. Also like to remind you that you should never underestimate the importance of dealing with people, because people are very important in your life, even though you may at times not recognize it, but they are very important in your life, in those of friends and colleagues, family, and the people you deal with in work and other situations. I'd also ask you to never underestimate that important maxim we talked about with all products and services to, for, and by. So all products and services are delivered to people, for people, by people. And it's important to remember that no matter what methodologies, procedures, systems, technology we're talking about, they do not deliver. It's always people who deliver everything. People are the deliverers. Never, ever forget that. So it's critically important that you never underestimate and always remember that in every action and decision you take, you should remember your humanity and the humanity of the people you're dealing with in each and every situation. And you need also never to underestimate that developing and practicing people skills are hard skills. In just the same way as many technical skills, no matter what it is, working with machinery or being a lawyer or being an engineer or being some other profession that requires technical skills, learning and developing people skills are hard skills for many, many people. And some people simply don't get it. But you're going to have to deal with those people as well in the things that you do going forward, no matter what it is that you are going to be doing. So are you a rebel? What might this mean? Now, the rebels attacked government forces. Is that what we're talking about? Well, hopefully that's not what we're talking about here. In such situations, there are often conquered or displaced people who will rebel against what a government is doing. And just in understanding that word rebels, the bell part of it comes from the Latin word for war, which was bellum. So there are rebels who are in that kind of situation for a whole lot of different reasons. That's what I hope we're not talking about today. What we need are rebels in a much more peaceful and productive way forward. So often it's been said that he or she or he, doesn't do things like everyone else. Now, in that situation, while we have this great liking for conformity, there are people who will turn their energies into positive outcomes. And if they didn't, there would be no advances for people, for groups of people, for our societies generally. And then we've got the situation of he, she doesn't like conformity. So for instance, years ago, where a non-native person would get a tattoo to look different, hey, it's not something that's incredibly different or not seen today. There are a lot of people with tattoos around, but that used to start as a way of saying, I'm not conforming with what my group or society wants from me. Now, order is needed in society, but I'm going to suggest to you that we need rebels too, and rebels are critically important to the advancement of society. In a later chat session, we will also talk about personality types and the impact that such personalities can have on the rebels. And let me also just make the point that when we're talking non-conformity, there are many ads on television, messages in social media that support conformity. In many instances, they're subliminal, they're subtle, but you need to learn to argue with what you see on the television screen, with what you see in programs, in movies and so forth, with what you see on social media. You need, in not being a conformist, you need to be able to argue with those other things out there in a critical way to be able to form reasonable opinions about what it means for you to be a rebel. So let's look at some examples. I remember I was good friends with a very, very good teacher, and she tells the story in her early days of teaching where the class were attentively listening to what she was telling them, except for this one student. This one student seemed to be totally disconnected, totally inattentive to what was going on in the class, totally inattentive to what this teacher was saying. And even though she'd seen this happening on previous occasions, on this particular day, it irritated her to the point where she stopped the class and she said to this student that the student didn't appear to be listening to anything she'd said for the last 15 minutes. Now, this student stood up and said, well, miss, I have been paying attention, and these are the 5 key points that you have made in the last 15 minutes. And this student identified them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and spelled them out and basically repeated back to the teacher exactly what the teacher had said in that 15 minutes of class. And yet she appeared not to be listening. Now, that particular teacher took that as a very serious lesson as to how she needed to be very careful about making judgment calls about people, about students' attentions, about their learning style, about what they might do that appeared to be different to all the other students in the class. And she never ever did that kind of thing again with any student. Now, I'd like to tell you a story about a 6-year-old boy who, in the usual conformity of society, was sent to school in those days when he was 6 years of age, and he was put into kindergarten. Now, the first week of kindergarten, or first week of school, started on a Wednesday. So he'd spent the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of that first week in kindergarten. He'd spent all 5 days of the second week in kindergarten. But on the Monday of the third week, he'd had enough. So he got up and he went forward in the class to wait to talk to the teacher, who was talking to another student at the time. So he politely waited there so that he could talk to the teacher. And when the teacher acknowledged him and asked him what he wanted, he simply said, "I'm not staying here. I'm not staying in this class. I'm going up to grade 1. Now, what do you think the teacher said? Well, very politely, the teacher said to the student that he should go and sit down and do what she'd asked him to do. And he said, no, I'm not. I'm not staying here. I'm going up to grade 1. Now, at this point in time, the teacher got a little bit firmer and told him not to be a naughty boy and to go and sit down and do what she'd asked him to do. And he said, no, sister. Why'd you call her sister? Because she was a nun. And they called the nuns sisters. No, sister, I'm not staying here. I'm not staying in this class. I'm going up to grade 1. And the teacher then, with some considerable frustration in her voice, told him not to be a naughty boy, to go and sit down and do what she'd asked him to do. He walked away. Did he walk away to his desk and sit down and do what he'd been asked to do? No, he didn't. He walked over into what had been designated as the naughty corner. The teacher followed him over and asked why he'd gone over here. He said, well, I'm not going to sit down and do what you've asked me to do. I'm not staying here. I'm going to grade 1. Now, to cut the story somewhat shorter, that was how it played out for the next 2 days, or until Wednesday afternoon. He spent most of that first Monday afternoon, all of the Tuesday and most of the Wednesday outside the office of the principal, because the principal had spoken to him a couple of times also, and he told the principal, who was also a nun, that he wasn't staying there. He was going to grade 1. Both the teacher and the principal told him that they wanted to talk to his mother. Now, he knew that his mother needed very desperately to continue working because she needed money for herself and him in terms of food and all the other things of daily living. So he didn't tell his mother until Wednesday morning that the nuns wanted to see him or see her, because he knew that she'd be finishing early on Wednesday. So Wednesday afternoon, she came down to see the nuns, and she was rather horrified when they told her the story of what had happened, and he told her the same thing. Yes, he agreed, that's exactly what had happened, and no, he wasn't staying in that class, he was going up to grade 1. Now, some wisdom prevailed in that, because the principal then basically decided, well, look, what we'll do is we'll put him up into grade 1 for a month. And when he realises that he can't do all the work in grade 1, he'll be quite willing to then come back to kindergarten. So we'll start him up in grade 1 next Monday. And that's where he started the following Monday, and that's where he stayed. He didn't go back to kindergarten. Now, that particular boy has done a lot of things in his lifetime. There are millions of people who, even though they don't know it, have been impacted by things that he's done, because he's been able to do things and think differently about them and do them in a different way than many other people have done. and he's been engaged by various employers to find solutions to things, solutions that other people have not been able to find. It was really a good thing that he went up to grade 1. Now, I'd like to give you an example, as to why rebels are important. If you think about the development of digital tech, that is a punch card, which you'll find a graphic of online these days. Otherwise, the original cards you'll find in museums. They were punch cards, and that was the early stages of shifting away from doing financial things with punch cards in National Cash Register machines, through to learning Fortran programming on IBM punch cards in the 60s and 70s. And that, in 1969, is how I started to learn Fortran programming, using IBM punch cards. They were part of the earlier developments of the computing revolution. From there, it went to big mainframe systems, but then it went on to greater development so that you had desktop computers, you then had laptops. And now, in these days, when you hold a mobile phone or similar device in your hand, you have got much more computing power held in your hand than what many of those early machines, those early mainframes and early desktop computers, much greater power than what they used to have. And then in the last 20 years, an enormous rise in social media. We're not going to go into arguments about or discussions about whether social media is good or not, but it's something that's risen in the last 20 years. It was certainly not something that was there 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now, with the pandemic online, for instance, there's been an enormous increase in working from home, in meetings online, in shopping and home delivery, in connections nationally and internationally. If society didn't have the rebels who were able to facilitate a lot of those things, we would still be back with pen and paper only, or, back in the ages where there was parchment used for writing and recording transactions and all other things. There have been enormous advancements made in our society, and for that we've needed rebels to be able to do it. So are you a rebel? What I'd suggest are some of the positive characteristics of a rebel. They see a problem or deficiency and they want to fix it. Rebels are passionately curious problem solvers. They will find a solution. They may not be able to find it alone, but they will find a way to find it, even with other people. And the solution is the focus. And they will listen to others in deriving a solution to a particular problem. They're people with driven egos. Now, people think that egos are bad news. We all need an ego. We all need an identity, an ID of us to be able to move forward. There are egos that get out of hand, but they need driven egos that permits others to engage with them and them to engage with other people. And that's a positive characteristic that's very important to our society, to the individuals, to groups, and to our society generally. The rebel with positive characteristics will well and truly develop critical analytical skills. Now, with those kind of situations, this kind of person is able to take a point of view outside of what their opinion is. They can look at the problem objectively. The problem is that thing out there, and they can take a third point of view without being totally restricted by their own point of view about that particular problem or solution, or another person's point of view of the problem or solution. They can work together to critically analyse what the problem is and how it might be able to be solved. And they know intrinsically that they could be wrong. And this is a critical thing with the positive rebel. They don't believe that they're always right. So their ego doesn't get out of hand in terms of driving them and their team or the group that they're working with to any solution. And also, a positive rebel will very much practice the words of Harry Truman in everything they do. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit. As long as you've got the solution, that's what the very positive rebel is looking for. Not being overly focused on all the credit that might come in relation to that, even though credit often does come for it, but to be well and truly aware that the solution is the critical aspect of it all. So then we reach this point of having excellent people. Rebels, they might be, but they're excellent people, and the teams around them are excellent people. So such excellent people have perspective, their own perspective, and are able to stand off and take a third perspective of the things that are being discussed. They will listen, they will collaborate with other people. And they have the greatest possible respect for other people. They respect other people's opinions, even if they disagree with them. So they're prepared to take that third point of view, that devil's advocate position, and stand off from the problem or proposed solution and critically analyse it to try and find a way to move forward. And it requires excellent people, when possible, to help build up other people. Leaders help create other leaders, not followers. And it's critically important to always remember that and take it into account. So leadership requires perspective plus respect plus service to give excellent people and excellent teams working together to achieve what needs to be achieved. Now back up there, I've put in red, requires when possible to help build up other people. I'd like to emphasize that I have said when possible, because if it's not possible, and sometimes it isn't, I'd strongly urge you to stay silent. Don't try to break down that other person. Don't try to destroy them. Don't try to make their life miserable. If it's not possible to build them up as people within the team, then stay silent. Let them, hopefully over time, learn what needs to be done to be an excellent person, to be a part of the team. So I'd simply urge you to remember that winning is through perspective plus respect plus service to help bring out the full colour of a team or a person's success, because the ultimate methodology is excellent people. People skills enhance technical skills and stop prophets' careers falling through the cracks in activities. So please join us, whether we're talking about your life, your career or business, to ensure that you are an excellent person and help develop excellent people in your team. You are what you believe yourself capable of becoming. With our help, you can expect to get there faster. And I'd offer you all our very best wishes for your future. Please contact us by email, phone, or address given below if you think that we can help you or your group, your team, your business to ensure you've got developing excellent people to provide the best solutions for what you do. And if you can put groups of people together, preferably we generally keep it to 5 to 10 people so that we can make sure that every person has got adequate attention for what we do. But if you can put a number of people together, we can offer you special deals in relation to our services. So with that, I'd like to thank you for being with us today for this chat session, and I wish you all the very, very best for the future. Take care now. Bye for now.